the influence of TikTok, the kind of stuff you see on there and that my daughter shows me is kind of mind-blowing. It's people who have all these eating challenges, 30,000 calories in a day and eating all pink food, just the wrong message on food that kids are getting. There's been a tone of almost acceptance of these drugs as though they are finally the solution to obesity. That is coming not only from obviously a very well-funded, multifaceted PR campaign on behalf of these kind of companies that are going as far as changing the education around these drugs, the education system, and sponsoring all the right types of things so that the experts themselves are saying that this is a good way to go about dealing with obesity. There's many obesity doctors that I'm now hearing talking about these drugs as a good thing.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have Olivia with us today. Olivia, it's good to see you. Good morning. Or I should say good evening, I think. Right? Are you back in the UK?
Yes, I am. And it's afternoon.
It's afternoon. Okay, well, it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you in, a whole 2 weeks or something like that. So,
yeah.
So I got to meet Olivia in London this last summer. And then again, we saw each other at Low Carb Denver. And so you are one of the principals at PHC, or the Public Health Collaborative or Physicians Health Collaborative? I can't remember what the P stands for. Public Health Collaborative in collaboration in the UK.
Right.
So PHC / UK.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. Thanks for joining. And I know you guys have a big event in England, which I'm very fortunate to be able to take part of in Sheffield here in the latter part of May. So excited to see you guys again in person.
Yeah, I can't wait to have you.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about, about yourself. How did you get into this? I know because you do a carnivore diet. I mean, I've had dinner with you a couple times now. And how did you get into that stuff?
Yeah, it's been quite a change for me to be in this kind of nutrition space at all. I started off my career very much in the business world, had about 23 years in probably the two biggest corporates in the UK, and very much was working in a kind of strategy marketing role all of that time. And was very dedicated to it, managed to, do well as far as, how we kind of measure doing well in those situations and corporates. I kind of got to the point where I was fairly burnt out by the whole thing. And I'd had some experience with my parents being unwell, and I'd had to, kind of support them alongside the rest of my family for a good 10 years because they had some illnesses, which I'll explain in a minute. But I kind of got to the point in my career where I was quite exhausted and wanted to figure out if there's something else I should be doing. And so I took some time out about 3.5 years ago, decided to resign and take some redundancy and just figure out what else is out there for me. And when I was off work and no longer, to kind of overtaken by kind of career priorities, I started to look into different things. And one of the things on my list to look into was, what is the right diet to be eating? Particularly because, as I mentioned, my parents had had some illnesses. So my dad had quite advanced Alzheimer's before he passed away, and my mum had type 2 diabetes, arthritis, and various other issues. And, we had, as a family, looked after them for a good decade, and we had kind of nursed them and, been there for them and given them the best quality of life that we could. But it was a huge burden on us, and not that we would change a minute of it, but it was, kind of heartbreaking to see them go through all of that. And I was a young parent at the time. So it was, a very hard process to go through for a decade. And it had always been on my mind that at some point I need to figure out if there's anything I can do to reduce my risk of getting any of those diseases. Because to me, in my mind, it was, well, I'm done for. These are hereditary and I'm going to have to probably just accept I'm going to get them. So, but I thought maybe if I do some research, maybe, I could eat a few more blueberries a week, or who knows, maybe if I go plant-based, that will help. I was kind of open-minded about it. I had no agenda. And I thought this would be quite a quick little piece of research that I would do, and then I'll move on to some other project that I could focus on. But I actually fell down this rabbit hole pretty severely to find out, having Googled how do I prevent myself getting Alzheimer's, that not only could you reduce the risk, but you can almost eliminate it. And the same goes for all the other diseases. And it was quite a revelation. And it was something that I was almost quite frustrated and angry about when I first heard, because I've been a fairly, I would say, healthy individual for many years, but I was still pretty overweight back then. But I used to run every day. Like I ran 7 miles a day, without fail. and never really lost any weight, but never thought I was, I thought, that's just the way I'm built. That's just the way things are. I'm happy. I'll have to just be content with that. And I remember running along one day and I was doing a bit of a sprint finish to my 7-mile run. And I remember, I think it was Dr. Berg that I was listening to. I just started doing this research and he said something like, good luck burning fat if you've got sugar in your blood. And it was a bit of a throwaway comment. And I suddenly realized I'd missed something all along. And I had to literally stop sprinting at that point and think, I've just had a huge smoothie full of oats and bananas because I always do that before I exercise. Is that the reason I never lose weight? So yeah, all of these things came together when I was doing this kind of research. And as someone with a background in kind of communications and marketing, it blew my mind that I didn't know something as basic as how kind of fat storage works and why I was overweight. So I immediately went onto a ketogenic diet and lost about 35 kilos. Over about, over about a year. And that was quite revelatory. And my husband did the same, and he lost a load of weight. He was always, quite heavy set kind of rugby player his whole life, but so his musculature, but was carrying fat. So he lost quite a lot as well. And, it really blew my mind that my parents didn't have to go through all of that. Disease is not what I thought. Disease is not hereditary. It's almost a choice that you make in life. And it frustrated me that I didn't know that, and that my parents' generation and other many, many millions of families have had to endure such suffering. So I thought, rather than going back to the traditional corporate role, which would be a lot more well paid, I would rather use my skills to think about how I can play a part in helping people understand the right message about diet. And, around the same time, the Public Health Collaboration, who I had recently got to know a little bit more doing this research, they started advertising for trustees to join their board. And they particularly wanted people with a commercial and marketing types of background. So I thought that's got to be a calling for me. And I immediately applied and had an interview and got that position, which I was really pleased about. And so ever since I have been kind of doing that work, but alongside that, progressing my own journey. And I moved over to Carnivore. Today is my 1-year carniversary.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of good timing. And so I have been doing even better on Carnivore, I'd say, than I was on keto, which was pretty good in itself. Yeah,
a lot of people have the same sort of journey from keto to carnivore. They find whatever, and it's always funny to me because it's like, depending on what you're doing with ketogenic diets, if you're eating a lot of the the fake sugary desserts all the time, people say, well, just cutting that out is going to help it. But a lot of them come from they're not doing much of that, and it's just a lot of vegetables and big salad. Like when I did a ketogenic diet, a lot of salads. I was eating these gigantic spinach salads. I'd take a whole pound bag of spinach, I'd throw it in a bowl, and then I'd throw all the ketogenic topics on there. And I hated it. I was just sitting there, oh gosh, I could eat all of these things. I didn't enjoy it. Well, I'd say I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed the toppings, but I didn't enjoy the leaves. And then you cut that out, and you cut that out, and your digestion gets better, and all these other interesting things that happen or tend to happen. At least it did with me. Let's just talk about the Public Health Collaborative for a little bit, or collaboration. Sorry, I'll get that right one of these days, I swear. So what is the mission? Because we've interviewed Graham, and we've interviewed several of the folks that have been on there, but I think it's important what you guys are doing mission-wise, and how has that progressed over time, and where are you guys heading? Obviously, you got this big event coming up, so obviously you're making some traction there. What's going on with that? Yeah,
the Public Health Collaboration was set up to really educate the public and the healthcare community on the importance of metabolic health, and to really empower people to, take control of that and to eat real food. And that's really it in a nutshell. There is also political lobbying that we do some of, but our main mission is to help people understand about metabolic health. I'd say up until now, our focus has been much more on the healthcare community themselves, really just by kind of nature of who's been involved in the organization, being many doctors who have a lot of contacts and really understand that system. So you will know kind of the Unwins who have come from and work in the NHS and have made lots of progress in making changes and educating others within the NHS about how to treat type 2 diabetes and food addiction. And now what we're trying to do, like I say, our next kind of big thrust is going to be thinking about how we can do that, more strongly directly to the public, and to start to, build our following so that we are seen as the kind of the voice of authority, the trusted voice in this space that can bring people the right information about how to deal with obesity and type 2 diabetes and all the metabolic illnesses. So we are all about metabolic health and educating people, both healthcare and public.
For those that aren't familiar with the term metabolic health, and many people in here know, and I know, and but people maybe watching this podcast have not heard that term before. So what is metabolic health, and how is it different from just health? I mean, why don't we just call it health? I think, but can you elaborate a little more on what do you mean by metabolic health?
Yeah, it's really the efficiency of your body being able to deal with how it produces energy, and if it can do that without creating any adverse effects in your body, then you have full metabolic health. We're actually going to develop a tool so that people can come along and do some diagnostics on their own metabolic health, and we'll give them the ability to kind of input some factors which will allow us to give them a bit of a rating so they can see where they are on the scale. And hopefully that will, and we know it's a term that people don't really know about, but we think it's important that people do understand it, because it's almost a missing link in what has been kind of known to people, which is that there's all these diseases. They're all probably, unrelated. They're all probably hereditary, partly or fully, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so what we're trying to do is tie all of those things together into the fact that there is one underlying process that is the cause of most of them. And if you are able to just focus on that one, you will have the ability to pretty much prevent yourself getting all of them, and they're all the scary things that we don't ever want to get. And they're all the horrible things that, people like me and many of us have had to watch others suffer from. So, if there can be one key to all of this, it is something which is just your metabolic health and your efficiency in burning fuel. So we will have to explain that. You're right, Shawn. But we're hoping that is something that people can understand and kind of relate to.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we start talking about blood glucose and triglycerides and blood pressure and body composition, all those types of things kind of go into the guise of metabolic health, which, in my view is just health in general. But unlike the United States, where we have a lot of for-profit medicine and a lot of privatized medicine, the UK is, and there is private, correct me if I'm wrong, there's private private healthcare there as well, but it's mostly through something called the NHS, or the National Health Service. And so, it would seem to me, because it's publicly funded and, they're probably not running at a profit, it would make a lot of sense for them to want to save money. But why, even in that situation, why aren't people wanting to save a lot of money by saying, hey, you fix your metabolic health and guess what? We don't have to pay for all these damn expensive medications. What has been the roadblocks for getting this message out into the NHS? I know Dave Unwin, and I've talked with Dave and of course Jen as well. They're both lovely, wonderful people. What's going on? Why are we not having more just like, this is obvious? I mean, it seems like so to all of us have done this, like, this is obvious. Why aren't we doing this? What's going on there? What do you think?
It's interesting. I mean, especially me from a corporate background, you have an opportunity to reduce your costs to the scale of what we're talking about here. You would be, I mean, it would never even get to that situation, but you would be all over it. So yeah, I agree. It's so surprising to me. And as soon as I heard some of the figures that, David was saving in his own practice, it seemed like a no-brainer and we should just do it. And it's an interesting question. And I'm not as close to the NHS, having come from a different background, but, it is known by those that are in the decision-making seats, that there is an opportunity to reduce these kind of costs. And I really think it's down to, the implications politically of having to face up to that sometimes. And, I think until there is a groundswell and a grassroots level of pressure, upwards pressure, that no real change will necessarily happen, not to a big effect anyway. I mean, we pay huge amounts in tax for our NHS. But everyone, whether you're whatever political leaning you have, everyone is hugely supportive of it in this country. No one would ever say that it's not the right thing to be providing the population in the society. But, we're spending £10 billion a year on type 2 diabetes, about 7 on cardiovascular disease, 5 billion on cancer, and, $1 billion or and a half or so on Alzheimer's. Those are just 4. And those are just the NHS costs. There's many other costs to society of those diseases. So you would think when you add those all up, and if you think that you've got a way that you could bring those costs down, which will have a huge impact on the taxpayer, you would think that that would be kind of whipped up, or at least, redirected by the government towards something that they would need funding for. But it's a really hard question to answer because, we have made this information very, kind of publicly available. But what we need to do is just make everyone in the population, we think, aware of it, because a lot of the conversation about the NHS right now is about how we put more money into it because it's struggling and it needs more support. And the narrative is not let's bring the cost down. The kind of political conversation is how we get more money to put into it, which is kind of crazy to us. So we do need to build the awareness of how much cost is its potential to take out. So our conference that's coming up in May, which we're very excited for you to be coming along to, Shawn, is the theme is all, this is how we fix the NHS. And we're going through each metabolic condition separately with different speakers and explaining its, origination in metabolic health, and also making the connection to those numbers that I just mentioned and how much we're spending, because the more the public understand how much they're paying towards something which is essentially totally preventable. I mean, 80% of what the NHS costs us is preventable. Then really the questions that are starting to be asked of politicians will change from how do we put more money into what are you doing to take the money out that we don't need to be spending. So we're hoping that this creates the right kind of environment and pressure for that to be more likely to kind of affect change, if that makes sense.
No, it makes absolute sense. And I see that, same thing in the United States when you listen to politicians talk about healthcare, it's always about how do we pay for this? How do we pay for that? And I'm like, why don't you just stop having so many sick people, which is very doable. Of course, we have to have discussions around the food system. And I was watching a conversation between a couple of people that are, in the know, or supposedly, or they're obesity researchers or health, nutrition people. And they said, well, the problem is, 50% of the world's food is ultra processed food. Now we know it's causing the problem, but we can't change that system. There's nothing we can do to impact that. We're always going to have more and more processed food. It's just a consequence of feeding massive amounts of people. And you need that high processing throughput in order to produce the amount of food that it takes to feed, billions of people. And so there's nothing we can do about that. No one's going to eat, a large portion of the population is not going to stop eating this stuff, so we have to find other solutions. And so we see things like some of these obesity drugs that are now being pushed. I don't know how. I think I saw, you're probably aware of this new class of drugs. Well, they're not that new, but they're recently new for obesity, previously being used for diabetes. The GLP-1 receptor agonists, right? So you have these things in the U.S. They're called, Wegovy, Monoro, or what I think is the name of it. And it's Ozempic is one of the more common trade names. So in the UK, I saw that was authorized, but it was only allowed for 2 years through the NHS. And so what happens at the 2-year point? Well, they get it all back, and maybe more, and they haven't changed their health behaviors whatsoever. And I know one of our members, Charlie, was talking about, he was at a restaurant here in a couple ordering, French fries and shakes and just saying, oh, it's no problem because I got my shot I can inject now. And so we're getting this, doubling down on the expensive, because I think about it, that drug costs $1,300 a month in the US. I mean, I could eat ribeye steaks on that every day, for that same amount of money, and we're subsidizing that. In a lot of cases, we have this willingness to tax the taxpayer. I'm sure it's the same in the UK, to subsidize the healthcare, which is providing not very good healthcare. And we would do better spending money and feeding people, better food, I think. But is that even an achievable goal? I mean, is there any goal of saying, hey, let's clean up our food supplies, or is it just too much corporate, because you come from the corporate where you know how much power they have, how they manipulate the politicians, how they manipulate the regulation. I just had a discussion yesterday with one of our state senators, here in the state of New Mexico, and he was talking, the purpose of regulation is to support the corporations who can afford to deal with the regulations, and everybody else gets squashed. So we have this corporatocracy that goes forward. Is that the same thing in the UK? Probably. Maybe
Yeah, I mean, certainly. My role when I was in a corporate background was, funnily enough, a lot of the things that I keep hearing about in terms of big food, big pharma, I unfortunately relate to. I used to lobby the government for having less regulation for the most part. And I used to also hold the budget for all the research that we did. So we would pretty much decide. I mean, most of the research we did was, in very good faith and wanted to be, finding out the right information to do our improve our product, if you like, and service better. But a lot of it was also knowing that we had a lot of challenge from regulators and from, kind of interest groups I was in the energy industry at this point, about, kind of energy industry issues. And we knew that we just needed some research to kind of make those issues go away. And so we do the research that we know is going to help change people's minds, and we will do enough of it that it can't be, disputed in any way. And so it's really easy to kind of have a very big impact on the regulator, and to, put aside any naysaying arguments pretty quickly with the research that we'll be able to show, which is very extensive and very solid. So at the time, it felt like we were doing the right thing, because ultimately we had a goal that we all kind of believed in. So it felt like just a necessary evil. But now that I look back at it, I really relate to all of the, the kind of stories you hear about big pharma and big food and research, because I know that's how corporates work. That's the nature of the beast. And I think, probably where the change needs to happen, I don't think you can change how a business functions. A business is always there to make money, and no matter what corporate responsibilities you put on it, it will pay lip service to that stuff, and it will still focus most of all on making a profit. If the regulator is not fully regulating that industry, then those things will continue to happen. And I don't think you can ever expect a corporate to not, to do the right thing and put aside profits if it's not regulated to do that. So yeah, I think that's the part of the system that needs to be improved. And on the weight loss drugs, we've certainly got that conversation going on over here in quite a big way. And I think what's really concerning about it, and some of the coverage that we've seen recently in quite a few papers, and also the Economist story cover, there's been a tone of almost acceptance of these drugs, as though they are finally the solution to obesity. And that is coming not only from obviously a very well-funded, multifaceted PR campaign on behalf of these kind of companies that are going as far as changing the education around these drugs, the education system, and sponsoring all the right types of things, so that the experts themselves are saying that this is a good way to go about dealing with obesity. There's many obesity doctors that I'm now hearing talking about these drugs as a good thing. And it's a hard message to change when it's got that much backing from so many different parts of the system. So yeah, we are, keen to try and change that narrative, because I think people accept that if they're in this category of, well, I'm just one of those that can't lose weight any other way. So, and now they're telling me that the human body is set up to never lose weight, because that's how our, survival mechanisms have always worked in the past. Then I'm obviously one of those. And a couple of years ago, I would have agreed and thought I was in that category, because there was no other way to do it. So, it is about helping people understand that there's a different way, which doesn't run out in 2 years' time when you gain it all back, as you said, and which you don't have to pay for, and which ultimately will leave you more healthy than less healthy. And, we just don't need to resort to it. And we've got ourselves so confused and so far up the wrong path that we can't quite see ourselves, our way back out. And, we're really hoping that we can start to be part of that conversation and offer, probably a very lone voice at the moment in the conversation of trying to get people back to eating real food and just being healthy.
Yeah, to me, it's just kind of kicking the problem down the curb a little bit. I mean, because, let's say you can get these people to lose 10, 15% of their body weight, which is considered enormously successful. They are still probably going to have just as much autoimmune disease and arthritis and all these inflammatory conditions, because the food continues to be causing problem, even though maybe they're eating less of it, or they don't have quite as much body fat on them. And maybe they're incrementally a little bit healthier, which is kind of the pharma model. It's just, let's make you a little less symptomatic. We're not going to cure you. We're not going to, as long as you're on our medications, that's our goal. And I think this is another one of those. And to see so many physicians just unquestionably say, hail it as this is the salvation for all the issues. And I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but we see them and they're just lining up behind it like, oh, good. And it makes good business sense for them. As I'm a physician handing out this drug like candy, I'm going to get a lot of patients and it's easy money. I mean, here you go, just charge you whatever, a couple $100 for the visit, the workup. Here's a pill, here's a drug, here's the injection. See you in, see you down the road, kid. And it's very short-sighted. And I think it's just, again, as you know, it's going to make Novo Nordisk or whatever the pharmaceutical companies that push this out a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then, well, let me ask you, because you said you used to interface with some of the lobbyists in the UK government parliament. Do you still have some of those contacts? Are you able to like say, hey, why don't you look? Are you still involved with those guys?
Not really, because the way we're organized politically is we have government departments. So I was more interfacing with our energy and industry department. And obviously this is the healthcare system. So it's very different. But I mean, there's some politicians that we are speaking to and hopefully will be interested in actually kind of hearing some of these messages. But we just know how the system works. And until there's just this, more pressure from the grassroots, it's unlikely to kind of take too much of an effect. And I think, I also look at this whole grassroots movement very much, from my marketing background, I always think about the way change happens in big populations. And the program that I looked after before leaving my last job was a 7-year program on changing the population of the UK's behavior to doing something different. And it was a major program. And the way you have to, slice that up is you think about the adoption curve, and this is normally kind of used in kind of the tech world, but it applies to any consumer behavior change or any behavior change, where you have, very early innovators, then you have early adopters, you then have an early majority, a late majority, and the laggards at the tail end of the bell curve, if you can imagine it. And I think it's going to be a case of really getting far up that curve before we'll see some tipping point at the top. At the moment, we've got all those kind of early adopters, innovators, all benefiting from this kind of diet. And I think for the most part, certainly the carnivore diet tends to be people who have had some kind of illness or condition where they've had to resort to doing something which is probably deemed extreme in their minds to start with. But then once they do it, they realize, oh, this makes total sense. So you've got a lot of people in that early slice of the bell curve that are arriving for that reason, and not many that I've met have just done it for the hell of it. There's always been some kind of driver. And I think the next stage of people are those that probably just want to be, maybe they're in the fitness world, or they just want to have better athletic performance or something like that, similar to maybe some of your motivations, Shawn, when you started. I think a lot of those guys, we need to start engaging and getting them along. And I guess the way I'm picturing it in my head is that the quicker we get along this curve, the quicker we get all these early adopters in and benefiting, the quicker there will be a word of mouth effect onto the next part of the curve, which will be the big chunk in the middle, the majority. And because I think ultimately people want to be healthy. They have followed the guidelines. They've just been the wrong guidelines. So I think, the quicker we can get to that early majority, which is going to start to be eating away the bigger chunks of the population, that's when we'll start to see, I think, a tipping effect where there will be enough people saying, we've got this wrong. What on earth is going on? Why are we not addressing this a different way? Yeah, so I think very much in kind of marketing terms with these things. But what's also useful is to think about the motivations in each one of those chunks, and are we putting the right messages out there? So are we giving people the right reasons to get engaged, knowing that they'll be in that kind of slice of the bell curve, so that we pull them in as quickly as possible and, get through this as long as possible. Because your bell curve can be like this, or it can be really long and slow. And what we don't want is it to be really kind of long and flat, which will take many, many more generations to kind of change what we're doing, and cost us more and be lots more suffering as a result. So yeah, that's how I'm kind of starting to see the picture. And I think until we get further up the curve, we won't get that change at the top. You were in the energy sector, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that work in that sector, a lot of companies that have lots of employees. I mean, would they benefit from their employees not being sick? I mean, this is one of the things I look at. I'm looking at, obviously, the pharmaceutical country is not interested in this. The big food corporations that make all the processed food are not interested in this, and they have tremendous sway and lobbying power, particularly the pharmaceutical industry. But
there's other big sectors, energy sector, industry, these have a lot of employees and they incur a lot of costs when their workers are sick. And so why not go after those guys and say, hey, look, we've got a way to perhaps save you millions of pounds a year on your healthcare costs by adopting things that are going to get these people off these expensive medications, because ultimately you bear the cost of it, whether, it's through insurance premiums or not. We can lower your costs by X percentage. What about that route?
I think that's a really good way. And in fact, I think it slightly accelerates our ability to get across that curve, because, if you're an employee of one of these big corporates and you're given a benefit as part of being in that corporate of free health advice or something like that as part of the package, then you're more likely to just try and get the value from it, because you're not having to go and seek it out. It's kind of there. It's been given to you. You might as well use it. Like when these guys come in and they do your blood pressure for free when you're at work, you think, well, I might as well do it. So I think that's a really good route to market, and one we should be trying to think about and explore further. I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing it with our venture, Revero Health. And let me ask you about this, because as someone who's in marketing and doing that, how much of how important is the social media aspect of it these days? I imagine it's immensely important, but how much are you leveraging that versus a traditional media, getting on the news and that type of stuff? Where does that fall in your calculus?
For us as PHC right now, it has to be our bread and butter, because we're a charity and we're not accepting funds from any industry to pay for advertising campaigns. So whilst in the past I would have had tens of millions of pounds at my disposal to do whatever I like with in terms of getting an advertising message out there, as a charity, as a small charity, we really rely on the support of the public, and our only route to communicating and creating that relationship with the public is through social media. That's because that's essentially free. And I'd say it's maybe probably our biggest priority. I'd say second of all is actual editorial media and getting into the right journalists and having the right relationships with the right journalists who do actually really like to cover this kind of story. So David Unwin has been in the news quite a lot in national print papers and online. Every time there's a good news story about someone reversing some condition or the other, generally the papers are fairly, it kind of fits their agenda of what they're trying to talk about. So media still plays a part, but I'd say social media is much more in our control, the biggest channel. We need to be across all platforms. We need to be thinking about the right kind of content that people are going to engage with, and really kind of, elevating all the stories, the good news stories of people changing their behavior. So yeah, absolutely massive.
You talk about the corporate, wanting to abstain from corporate dollars because you're a charity, but I mean, there are a lot of corporations that are putting out, a contrary message, particularly when we see like the ultra processed, particularly fake meat products. I mean, they're spending billions and billions of dollars and I'm sure pounds or many millions of pounds to push that out there. So they've got all this sort of money on their side. And, we've seen this over the last, really 5 years and probably more. We need to give up eating meat. We need to go eat this synthetic plant-based stuff. And that's been out there in the message. Now, what I'm seeing, and subsequent to that, under the guise of, saving the planet through climate change, we saw, you being in, well, you guys aren't part of the EU anymore, but, you're in that geographic region. I saw recently, a big push to eliminate a lot of the farmers up in the Netherlands, and I just saw that they built up a big political party and they've actually won a bunch of elections. So there's some hope that maybe the grassroots people are starting to push back from this sort of, we're going to all be eating, eat the bugs, so to speak, eat the whatever, or the processed garbage, get rid of meat, which is, as as a carnivore, it's incredibly health giving. And so what are you seeing something in the UK, a little pushback around against the sort of the corporate narrative of we're all going to be, eating these little pellets, these little bars, I call it human pet food. Is there some appetite to push back against that?
I think so. I mean, I think the appetite is there, but, I was having an interesting conversation with Jane Buxton about this the other night, who wrote The Plant-Based Con, and whose book we're reading at the moment. We were talking about, how big is this threat? Obviously in the Netherlands, it's taken hold and it's affecting policy. And there are definitely parts of the system that are going in the wrong direction. So, for example, my daughter's school teaching her that beef is the biggest contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions and things like that. And, kind of schools wanting to implement meatless days. And, I think that kind of stuff needs to be definitely pushed back on, but there's not that much of it, not as much as I see when you see these reports about the Netherlands and other countries, and like New Zealand being taxed as farmers for having cattle and that kind of thing. So, I think if it was to grow, there'd be more pushback. I'm not seeing as much pushback, but I also am not seeing as much change as I'm hearing from other countries. So I'm hoping that's good. And someone was saying the other day that, I think like the plant-based movement is something like 1% of the population globally, people eating in that way. And there's more people who used to eat that way than are still eating that way. So there's more ex-vegans than there are vegans. So how much of a threat is it? I think it's got the forces behind it to be a threat, but I'm not sure it's got the volumes to almost have the equivalent grassroots movement that we need to have to kind of stop it, and which I think we would have to stop it if it got bigger. So maybe I'm being a bit too optimistic there, but
well,
I think
I was going to say, I saw like in Scotland, up in Edinburgh, they banned meat completely out of their public school system, and many other. So, there's obviously some people in there that have enough position of power and authority to make these changes in certain sectors. And so does that spread? Is it a disaster? Is there other people that are saying that's not going to happen? And I like I see, what I see is, as you mentioned, they're bringing this up in the schools. And so they're kind of, I would call it, I would go far as to say, is an indoctrination of our young kids, so that they're, when you look at who's willing to go on a plant-based diet, and you ask people over 50, they say, hell no. No, they're very few. But when you get into the kids that are, teenagers, early 20s, and you start seeing, 20% are saying, I would consider that. Or so we're seeing this sort of, by generation sort of change.
Yeah.
And so, to their detriment, in my view, I think they just end up with more, like you mentioned, metabolic health issues, nutritional deficiencies, which are, clearly a concern. So yeah, that's something that, so you, and I've met, you've got, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you had a little boy and a little girl, 2 children. I met your husband out there in London, and they seem like they're pretty healthy and happy. Are they on board? What when they tell you, hey mom, we're being taught that, meat is bad for us and we should give it up? Are you, obviously you're probably correcting there, it's like you have to unbrainwash your children, it seems.
Yeah, they're pretty cleared up. Obviously, our influence has had some positive effect there. But, my daughter, who's 14, I did a little interview with her and her best friend, who's also carnivore, recently. And just, coming at it from always coming at it from what's the motivation, what drives behavior change. It was really interesting and insightful to hear their journey as teenagers in a world where everything is about being plant-based, and, they are fed that narrative. And what they have both done is, my daughter has, she's lost quite a lot of weight. Her athletic performance. She's always been very sporty. She plays netball, which is like basketball, but without the dribbling. But her performance in netball has gone, really high. She's getting constant kind of feedback from her coaches that her performance is, outstanding compared to what it used to be just a kind of a year ago. She's running in races and winning them, and she never did that for at least the last 5-6 years. So she has seen the benefits. And it's interesting, as teenagers, they have very different motivations. So they are much more interested in appearance and what they, kind of look like in front of others. And, my daughter's friend was very interested in, whether she was getting split ends on her hair, and that has stopped happening. And it's all these little kind of more aesthetic based, frivolous reasons and benefits that they're seeing, but which means a lot to them at that point of their lives. And what's even more interesting, I think, is the social pressures that they have had to contend with, because they, my daughter goes into school with a thermos flask every day with scrambled eggs and bacon, and does not eat the food at school, even though we have to pay for it, which is very annoying. But, she gets, kind of peer pressure and, why are you eating eggs? That's gross, smells, and, kind of why would you eat bacon? And, and because she has seen the benefits so kind of clearly in herself and what it's achieved for her, she kind of knows that this is all a load of nonsense that everyone is talking about. So she's had to kind of deal with that in, her own way, but she's very happy to. And every time I say to her, would you want to go back and eat a different way? She's like, no, why would I compromise my health for other people's, kind of ignorance and to fit in. I'm more than happy to not fit in and be healthy. So I'm really glad that because she's taken that on herself, and there's nothing I can do to control her the way she thinks. So she's really benefited. And my son is really into it, and he loves his meat anyway. He's obsessed with jerky. He takes jerky to school every day, and all his friends try and steal it from him because they love it too. And so we have a big jerky production line going on to kind of keep them all propped up. And he's got a little cooking channel that he makes little real food recipes on Instagram. So he's always thinking about kind of how we can help other kids and help them to eat the right way and still eat kind of good food, but and cook it themselves, because I think that gets people a lot more engaged as well. And his friends have been really kind of supportive of his little cooking channel. So they're doing really well. I'm kind of surprised myself, but I think ultimately, we were always forcing them to eat vegetables. It was really easy for them to say, hang on a minute, why are you two eating meat and not eating vegetables? And we've got to eat this kind of steamed broccoli. So as soon as we went carnivore, they were like, well, I'm sorry, but we're going to eat steak too. So yeah, 4 steaks a day at the moment. But they're really happy with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you think you could leverage that, particularly like, young girls are so concerned with their appearance, and, you say, hey, look, you're going to have better hair, better skin, you maybe not as much acne because you give up all the sugar and some of the other things that often are associated with that, it could be another, another way in, because, despite all the nonstop propaganda, you tell a girl, hey, you're not going to be as heavy and you're going to look better. That's pretty powerful for a lot of them, particularly at that age. So it may be another marketing leverage tool that could be utilized. So I look at, there's studies in the dermatology literature looking at plant-based diets and how bad it actually is for healing and skin. And there's a dermatologist in Italy has published 4 peer-reviewed studies in the literature on that stuff. And I sometimes will say, hey, look, it's not very good for your skin, going this plant-based stuff. And so could be another avenue to consider exploiting, because I do think we have to figure out a way to get these kids realizing that, going plant-based is not in their best interest, and, eating a animal-based diet is probably going to be better. And so we're seeing some of that, and from the guy's standpoint, it may be just, at a certain age, boys start caring about how much muscle they have. I don't know what it's, as soon as they hit kind of puberty, it seems to be. So you can get in there and start to leverage that thing. It's, stronger muscles, better athletic performance, better hair, teeth, skin, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so,
and weight loss is an interesting one, because you have to be really careful with kids and putting out a weight loss message, because that's eating disorder land and all of that kind of stuff. But
I think the standard UK diet is an eating disorder. It already is. It really is.
Put aside the fact that we have the highest obesity levels in kids in the whole of Europe. It's crazy that we can't talk about weight loss. So I think we have to figure out how to do it, but it is definitely the right motivator. And if we can figure out how to do it, then I think that would be quite powerful. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't shy from it. I think I'll use the word fat. If you're too fat, it's a problem. I think there's a point where we get worried about stepping on people's toes and offending people. And you just have to say, look, we're here to try to help you. And, if the language is harsh, so sometimes it needs to be, but anyway, that's, it's not everybody agrees with me on that, and I'm willing to accept that. But what is the direction of the PHC over the next coming years? Because you said you've been trying to, influence policy through the usual channels. Because I look at people like Nina Teicholz, so I'm sure you know Nina, and she's been laboring for years now trying to affect the U.S. dietary guidelines. And even though she provided just ample evidence, they just like, we don't have an interest in that. And I've always said, look, you've got to convince the people it's got to be grassroots, and people have to, I think the market has to dictate this, because this is what, the governments are owned by the corporations. I think that's fair to say in a lot of ways, or at least heavily influenced by those guys. And they're influenced by what they can sell. And so I think if the market says, hey, we don't want this crap anymore, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Where are you guys going?
So I think, going back to what I said earlier, I think our focus has to be on getting further up this curve and getting the public engaged. And, until we have that, for me, that unlocks the whole thing. But I think there's different ways to do it. And there's lots of things we can do within that to be as efficient as we can be, just being really present on social media, thinking about how to land the messages well with the different types of demographics, different attitudinal perspectives that consumers have. And I think the other thing is that we as PHC operate at the moment in the UK. You mentioned Nina, she's operating in the US, and there are other organizations that we're effectively doing something very similar in different parts of the world. And really, we should be leveraging each other and being more of an alliance in that respect. So it's something we're really interested in exploring with the other organizations. I think there's the SMPH in the US as well. There's Low Carb Down Under. All of us are, Nina is more of a political lobbying focus. We are more kind of education of the masses and the healthcare community. So we're probably a bit more in the grassroots space, but she also is very interested in being involved in the grassroots space. So there's lots of learnings we can get off each other in that respect. So I think, having these alliances and making the most of it is going to be really important as well. And, sharing each other's content, sharing each other's, conferences and, bringing this together into a bit more of a global movement, I think will pay dividends if we can get that working right. We also have some other projects in the pipeline that we're working actively on. So we have something called the Lifestyle Club, which is a piloting of an online health coaching service. And it is something we offer to the NHS and is being used in certain parts of the country, and provides a service where the GP can refer patients who are pre-diabetic or diabetic onto this service. And then we coach them through over a number of weeks, and we're really helping people totally change the course of their diabetes. And we really want to increase the coverage with that service, ramp it up, and expand it beyond just diabetes into a broader lifestyle offering as well. So that's quite a key focus for us. We've got another project called Collaboration for Kids, which is very focused on the kids space, and which I'm very passionate about being involved in, which is looking at the right behavioral models to get kids to change their behavior. So some of the interviewing I do with my daughters, we're going to kind of help provide some insight in that space, because we want to go into kind of schools, hospitals, other places that kids have an interface with, and think about the information that we provide through that and how it can help influence kids away from eating the wrong food, and also work with families as well. In particular, we're talking about things like the influence of TikTok, when to go back to social media, the kind of stuff you see on there and that my daughter shows me is kind of mind blowing. It's people who have all these eating challenges, and, they're eating, 30,000 calories in a day and something stupid like that. And, eating all pink food for a day or whatever it might be, but it's just the wrong message on food that kids are getting. I'm kind of seeing as entertainment value, but it's, there's an underlying message that food is for entertainment, and therefore let's have a challenge with it. It's totally the wrong food that they're eating. So we want to use this Collaboration for Kids to also start to rebut some of the content like that you see on TikTok, and maybe have something that's quite standout and compelling on TikTok as well, but in a different way and for the right reasons. And then we've also got the food addiction work that Jen is doing, which is really starting to kind of grow. And there's some great resources that she's got online on our website, which allow people to kind of diagnose if they have a food addiction. And we're trying to get that recognized as an actual official addiction, so that people get the right support. Because many of them try the diet and, try low carb and find that it's just too difficult, and they turn their back on it. And actually what's happening there was that they just had a very strong food addiction that needed to be dealt with, and they would have been fine. So yeah, we have all these very key projects that we are focused on, as well as trying to build our momentum and getting the public to really support us.
We got just a few minutes left. Let's take a few minutes to talk about this upcoming conference you have. Who's going to be there? What is the focus of the talk? Where is it going to be? When's it going to be? How do people find out more about it? How do they support it? How do they get there? I don't know where Sheffield is. I'm going to have to figure it out when I get there eventually. I'm sure you'll let me know how to get there. But yeah, tell us about the PHC conference that we have up in the end of May.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the most exciting thing that we are looking forward to at the moment. So we have an annual conference, and this year, for the first time, it is going to be in a venue which is really geared up for the public. We've always generally been in academic institutions before, so there's been a kind of capacity limit. This time, there's a very high ceiling capacity limit. So we really want the public to come along and support us and to learn about metabolic health. And they'll be able to do that by hearing all the, loads of world leaders coming along. We've got Ben Bickman talking about insulin resistance. We've got Georgia E talking about mental health. Obviously, the other ones will be talking about food addiction and type 2 diabetes. We've got a specialist, Professor Roy Taylor, who's one of the leading research in type 2 diabetes. He's going to be presenting as well. Obviously, yourself, Shawn. Who else have we got? Sophia Clemens talking about cancer. So we're pretty much going through all of the metabolic, and it's structured around going through all the metabolic conditions and trying to get as many of the leading edge scientists or specialists there to talk about those in a way which is really accessible to the public. So if we can, kind of bring people along this journey, come and have this weekend in Sheffield, learn about metabolic health, learn about, what is out there and what the options are. We really believe that if people then do take that on and pass it on to others that they know of, that we will start to see, more change at the grassroots level. So anybody in the UK that is interested in supporting the PHC in general because of what we're doing, the best way to do it is to come to our conference in May. And it's all on phcuk.org/conference, where you can find out all the speakers and come along. We're going to have an interesting discussion that you'll be part of, Shawn, between yourself and some others on a panel on the benefits of plants in the diet, which I think will be probably one of the first times we've had that type, or I've seen that type of discussion occur in a conference. We normally, have all of these topics kind of in isolation, as opposed to, just bringing together what we think is, quite a range of information that the public have to get their head around, which is, should I go plant-based or should I go meat towards or stick with meat? And many don't even know about the carnivore diet at all. So we're hoping to help people reconcile all the very contrasting ideas that are coming out in terms of the nutrition space. Maybe be open-minded to try more than one of them. But we're hoping that's going to be something that's going to be very interesting to people. They will want to come along and listen to, obviously, not least because you'll be part of that panel, Shawn.
Well, it sounds like fun. I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, so and as far as anything else you want to share, your social media, I know you've got an Instagram account, which I believe I follow. For people who want to hear more about you and your journey and your family, if you share with that, and how do we find about that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm Olivia Khwaja, Olivia Khwaja on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, it's my carniversary today. Someone said to me that I should do a little video, so I might start doing more of that. But I generally share lots in terms of media coverage around what's going on, that especially ones that I think we need to kind of call out, and how our health journey is going as a family. So yeah, anyone can follow me there. And then my son Bailey has a Real Food Kids Instagram account that he's been trying to get people to kind of come along and comment on. So that would be great as well. I think there's a picture of you and him on there, in fact, Shawn. And yeah, that's it, I think, at the moment.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Olivia. And I look forward to seeing you again here in a few months. So anyway, thank you so much for doing this, and good luck with the continued success with the PHC, because what you guys are doing is so incredibly important. And, I just think for the good of society, I don't like to go out in public and see all these sick, unhealthy people. It just doesn't, it's not a good place. It's not a good place to be, and all the mental health issues that go with that. And so anyway, thank you for doing this, and thanks for being part of the PHC. And I look forward to seeing you in not too long. So thanks. For the rest of it,
problem. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back tomorrow, everybody. Everybody else, take care. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everyone.